Just how important is free will, agency? Bruce Charlton. William James Tykanevich has written a blog post about a fictional book that, as part of its story, attempts, albeit from a Jewish rather than Christian perspective, it was written by a rabbi, to provide an intellectual model that combines the attributed omniscience and omnipotence of God, with human agency, or free will. But, as William argues, endorsed by comments from myself and Francis Berger, the model actually, by its assumptions and implications, sacrifices human agency in order to sustain the omni-God assumption. In this respect, and in common with nearly all Christian theology, including mainstream Roman and Eastern Catholic and Protestant theology, it is evident that the omni-nature of God is primary, and an understanding of human agency and freedom is something that is, in practice, sacrificed to the need to ascribe omni-attributes to God. This is confirmed when the rabbi-author, Shaul Beer, responds to the post with a couple of comments, finishing with,
"Like those who came before me, I am content, as you say, to leave it as an unresolved mystery of God."
The rabbi's response is therefore essentially identical with that of most Christian theologians over the past couple of millennia, and I translate it as follows.
We are sure and certain that God is omnipotent and omniscient. We also recognize that men must be free agents in order that each man's choices have meaning. But, although we can provide confusing, complex abstract pseudo-explanations of how this might be possible, none of these explanations really make sense. And we cannot provide a clear, simple, coherent account of how free agency is possible with an omni-God. So we call the situation of man's freedom in the context of omni-God a mystery.
The question I ask is this good enough? And I answer, no, it is not good enough. It is, in practice, treating the matter of coherently understanding human agency as trivial, and not something that needs to be understood. It is commonly asserted that all Christians, and, apparently, all Jews, must believe in the omni-God, or else they are not Christians, or Jews, because omni-God just is God, because supposedly nothing else makes any sense. Man's freedom, in stark contrast, becomes something that must be taken on faith, as a form of words, by the asserted necessity for each of us to trust in the validity of theological authority. Apparently, omni-God is mandatory, while by contrast free agency is something that needs to be asserted but does not need to be understood, and, because of omni-God, freedom cannot be understood. Unsurprisingly, in practice, traditional Christian theology has always tended to assert God's omni-nature as interpreted by the Church, whichever church prevailed, while human agency was considered to be a problem. Indeed, human agency is blamed for the evils of this world. It seems that the only proper role of human freedom, in traditional theology, is to make the right choices from among those presented by God. Unsurprisingly, since there is only one right answer among choices, and all possible answers are God-given, it has seemed to many Christians that it might be better if humans had simply been pre-programmed to make these right choices. It has thus seemed that the only significant role of human agency is negative. Freedom is seen as the freedom to do wrong, which fits with the pointlessness of human life when God is omni. Since such a God is everything, then human beings can add nothing to creation, which implies that creation of humans was futile, because, from this perspective, at the bottom line, the best a human can do in life, is to follow a predetermined path of correct choices. Apparently, freedom has no positive role. Thus, by such accounts, the problem of omni-God and human freedom has been solved by reducing human freedom to an expression of negative resistance to God's reality. Freedom becomes regarded like a disease, something wrong with men. Hence the centrality of original sin. However, if the logic is followed, we get the bizarre assertion that this supposedly omni-God, for some mysterious reason, created flawed human beings who can only mess up. The things is, our freedom, our agency as human beings, is experiential, something we know innately and directly. Whereas the omni-nature of God is something inferred as a consequence of non-intuitive abstract assumptions, and via logical procedures that many or most people cannot follow, or regard as flawed. And that is a problem. It is a problem that will not go away. Christians know we are free, and yet we are told that this knowledge of agency is subordinate to the assertion of omni-God. Officially, we are told that the ultimate answer is that common sense cannot comprehend this situation, for the situation is necessary and unavoidable, therefore it is a mystery. And yet this mystery is made to be foundational to being a Christian, and also perhaps a Jew. Well, in the end, the only responsible way to address this situation is for each of us to plumb the depths of our primary assumptions concerning the ultimate nature of reality, to establish what we really suppose to be known, and sure, and foundational. Is it what we have been told, or what we experience? Upon this hinges a great deal. Life hacks and bucket lists are symptoms of profound spiritual degeneracy. Bruce Charlton. Sometimes the massive popularization of a term is symptomatic of deep civilizational disorder. Two instances are life hack and bucket list. Superficially, these are harmless diversions, trivial rather than deadly. The problem is in what lies underneath the pervasive chatter, the assumptions upon which these terms are built. A life hack is an instant, easy, shortcut or cheat, to deal with some everyday problem of living. The assumption of which this is a surface symptom, is that this is how life ought to be dealt with. A profound but concealed assumption of life hacking is that human life consists of a multitude of discrete, immediate problems, and our job is to find the most efficient way to deal with these problems. The implication is that our actual life will incrementally and qualitatively be improved, e.a. made more pleasurable, with less suffering, by implementing more and ever more such life hacks. The degenerate quality of life hacks is that life is the kind of thing for which we ought to be seeking quick and easy tricks, that life is ultimately a set of problems of living that we need to solve. So the best way to approach life is to be armed with plenty of hacks, applicable to the widest possible range of challenges. Life hack attitudes and methods have, it seems, already taken over student attitudes in formal education. Learning is just too slow, inefficient, and hard work. Education is now seen as a set of immediate problems, tasks, for which the most effective approach is to have a toolkit, quick, easy shortcuts. Also, academic attitudes in science. What gets called science nowadays has nothing to do with seeking or speaking truth. Research is all about hacks to get funding, get the necessary results, get published, get cited and invited, get personal security, status and salary. And life hacks are open-endedly extendable, for instance much self-help, spiritual teaching of a new age type, and including the manosphere, is life hack thinking applied to human relationships, to love, marriage, family and friendship. The same can be seen in discussions of religion. The Birdemic response of mainstream churches was that their religion was reducible to efficient and convenient life hacks, such as live-streamed and recorded services or sermons, and no travel required online interactions. Bucket lists derive from the idea that somebody is about to die, i.e. kick the bucket, and consists of a list of the things I most wish I had done before I die. As if someone is on the deathbed, looking back, and gaining satisfaction or plagued by regret over his accomplishments. The underlying idea is that death is annihilation, but therefore a good life is one in which we have done as many things that we really want to do, before the curtains come down. A bucket list is meant to be a public thing too, so that we can get status, and provoke conversations, by making public a bucket list, preferably one that is suitably impressive to other people. And then adverting via social media, or mass media if you are a celebrity, our progress in working through that list. You win the game by having an impressive to other people list and completing the list. This is implicitly to have had a good life. Alternatively, people are invited to feel sad with you if, for some reason, you cannot or do not tick of an item. If terminal cancer prevents that bungee jumping, if an insufficiently supported Kickstarter funding prevents you taking that African safari. This is implicitly to have had a tragic life. Life hacks and bucket lists are both degenerate fads because of their strategic dishonesty and implicit evil. Life hacks are instrumental thinking. They are predicated on using the world and other people for our own short-term ends, to fulfill our current desires. If life was the kind of thing susceptible to life hacks, life would consist essentially of individuals' efforts at learning tricks to exploit each other, to get satisfaction at their expense. Life would not be worth living. And if death was the kind of problem that could be in any genuine way ameliorated by the successful completion of bucket lists, then death would not be final, death could not be an annihilation. Because if death is the end, then what we have done or not done in life makes no difference. How we happen to feel about our previous life, on our deathbed, just about to die, looking back, would be utterly irrelevant, because dying would be just one temporary blip of emotion, among multi-millions of others, doomed to nothingness. If after death we will be gone utterly, then it cannot possibly matter either way whether or not we watched the sun rise or set, off the Florida Keys. Yet, if death is not really the end, and we will survive in some form, to be affected in some way by our completion, or not, of bucket lists, then life after death is something that needs explicitly to be acknowledged, and its implications explored. So yes, at one level these are trivial fads, just a harmless way of passing the time or having something to gossip about. Yet life hacks and bucket lists are evidence of the deep, unacknowledged, and contradictory malaise of our civilization, of the ways in which we persistently refuse to think through implications. A symptom is produced by the underlying pathology, in this instance, spiritual degeneracy, but a symptom is not conclusive evidence for the underlying pathology. So, you can have the pathology without the symptom, and vice versa. Thoreau in Walden, Emergence of Modern Consciousness. Bruce Charlton. I have been rereading H.D. Thoreau's Walden, 1854, starting at the very beginning with the chapter Economy. I've been reading this book, on and off, for 50 years. First, I was struck afresh by the muscular brilliance of the writing. This is prose of the highest level. But secondly, it struck me how modern is the expressed perspective of Thoreau. He writes from the position of mainstream modern alienation, one which looks out upon the world and deliberates how to get the best deal from our interactions. And Thoreau's idea of a life well lived is rooted almost wholly in feelings, in his own responses to ideas and situations. And, much like New Age spirituality, Thoreau seeks to engineer his environment, and himself, such as to achieve the highest possible level of personal gratification, and minimize the inevitable degree of personal suffering. The chapter is called Economy because it focuses on how to get the most gratification from life, which for Thoreau entails as much unstructured time as possible, to be spent in and around Concord and often alone, while paying for this with the least investment of time and unpleasant effort in work. This attitude was something new in mid-19th century USA, when the book was written and published, because so individualist. Even Thoreau's direct mentor R.W. Emerson, just circa 14 years older, was much more communal and social in his perspective. Yet nowadays the argument of economy is, more or less, what almost every adolescent considers at some point, although the conclusions most modern Westerners reach are typically very different from Thoreau's idea of reducing his material needs to the lowest minimum, so that he needed to perform the least amount of paid labor. I would call Thoreau's attitude to the world instrumental. He was trying to use the world to attain his ends, to get as much as possible back from the least possible investment, even though Thoreau used his freedom to pursue a romantic agenda, and it is as a poet of nature that he is most remembered. And Thoreau is a pioneer and exemplar of the hedonic morality of mainstream modernity, in which goodness is calibrated against the current feelings of the observer. Only in terms of a kind of pantheism does Thoreau depart, somewhat, from mainstream modernity. I mean that he seemed to assume a deistic, ordered, and therefore meaningful, although not purposive, backdrop of ultimate reality. Consequently, because reality is not a creation, nor is it going anywhere, Thoreau was a contemplative, which we might term a consumer rather than a creator. His aspiration was to enjoy nature, not to participate in creation. He saw no role for himself or other individual persons in shaping reality, because that reality was going nowhere. Therefore his highest spiritual experience was to forget himself and time and the world in extended moments of ecstatic bliss, each of which was understood as an epiphanic revelation of the ultimate stasis of oneness, the realization that he was part of this oneness, and had rejoined it, for a while. Of course, I am exaggerating the simplicity and clarity of Thoreau's perspective and aspirations, because he was of course a mortal man, and one who had been brought up and educated in a Christian nation, town and city that retained considerable theistic Calvinistic elements, as well as a more recent, deistic Unitarianism. Nonetheless, Thoreau is a strikingly modern figure, although his early death somewhat prevented the full implications of his worldview from working themselves out in his life. Post-Civil War USA, which Thoreau did not live to experience, starkly revealed many of the unpleasant consequences of Thoreau's perspective and assumptions, although he may of course have denied and ignored most of these ill effects, as did most of his circle. But I feel that Thoreau's mindset was an inevitable phase in human history, one analogous to the arrival of adolescence. Thoreau was, then, an expression of the adolescence of mankind, emerging, in his era and culture, for the first time in a recognizable form. And there is nothing intrinsically wrong with spiritual adolescence, so long as it is indeed a phase, leading towards spiritual maturity, and does not become, as it has in the modern West, a lifelong state. Keeping children safe. Oh yeah, sure. Bruce Charlton. I need not bother to provide evidence of how little the establishment cares about the safety of children in the UK. All their favourite strategic policies tormented, harmed and killed children on a truly colossal scale, and then condoned and concealed this, directly, and indirectly. So when there is legislation that purports to be motivated by concern for the safety of children, we should immediately know that this is a lie, and the motivation is certainly quite other. And know too that the real motivation is certain to be evil, or else it would not systematically, and by saturation and coordination, have been lied about. And also, we know with certainty it is evil because everything that our Western leadership class is pursuing seriously over the long term is strategically and intentionally evil, and I mean every single thing. It seems that the access to media is already more explicitly and aggressively restricted in the UK than any other Western nation, especially after geopolitical events in early 2020, and then again from early 2022. A lot of stuff that can be read online from the US, Commonwealth and Europe, has been blocked in the UK for the past 3 to 5 years. You didn't realize? Well, that is significant, one way or the other. Question: what kind of stuff is blocked? Answer: stuff critical of the major programs of UK establishment policy, of course. Those litmus test issues I linked early. So far this past week I have noticed several blog posts blocked by a message stating that the problem with content is child safety, when actually the content is related to some kind of analysis of privileged and powerful social and ethnic groups. Would-be readers are sometimes asked to provide age verification, i.e. to create an account and explicitly identify themselves, in order to read this anti-establishment material. Well, I expected nothing else. The West is now, after all, a fully totalitarian society, just closing a few remaining loopholes of unrestricted discourse. And they are only interested in doing things to us, and not at all in what we want, and it has been like this for many years. As always, the truly vital thing is that we 1. Recognize the situation. 2. Recognize it for what it is, i.e. they are lying in order to harm us, physically, but mainly spiritually. 3. Recognize the net evil strategic motivations of our leadership class, whether institutional, national, and global leadership. 4. Realize that therefore the worst spiritual harm comes from our consenting to the validity of their imposed worldview and motivations, and from consenting to their authority to control our worldview and motivations. 5. Be confident that they cannot spiritually harm us, unless we invite them into our hearts. But that is exactly what so many people do in excusing them as having naive good intentions, or being merely selfish and greedy, or being merely stupid and ignorant and short-sighted. Things are much worse than that. In truth, our leaders do bad things to us, for bad reasons. What we need to do is be clear and explicit in our own minds as to what is going on and why, and then to reject it as evil. Too many people jump to advocating effective organized opposition. Not that this ever actually happens, but that does not stop people calling for it, automatically, like a speak-your-weight machine. But opposition as such is futile and indeed counterproductive, especially when opposition is itself motivated by some strategically net evil program, inevitably rooted in the hedonic materialism of all public discourse. Corrective and good social action may or may not be possible in practice, but whether possible or not, good action cannot possibly happen without a prior and sustained inner act of discernment, responsibility and courage. While of course we should strive not to cooperate or support evil, organized opposition will be futile or counterproductive unless genuinely motivated at every level, because to evil does not lead to good, unless there is motivation to good. And at the bottom line, as this process expands and envelops, we should recall that, in net effect, mass/social media do vastly more harm than good. All restrictions on mass media will almost inevitably make it less popular overall, less engaging, less addictive. So that, by pursuing short-term expediency, evil is, to a significant extent, thwarting its own long-term success. After all, to be denied some particular external inputs, and to be thrown back upon our own personal experiences, evaluations, personal contacts, and individual reasoning, is probably just what we most need. In our civilization and nation, things probably need to get worse before they can get better, but they will get better only if we first understand enough of what is going on. That is what is required of Christians for salvation. It is indeed all that is required of us, in a negative sense. Of course, the reality is that to move on to resurrected eternal heavenly life, we must commit eternally to live only by love, and the rejecting of evil is really just a means to that end. This also applies to the air slop that is flooding mass and social media. Since this, as with all aspects of AI, is backed by subsidies and amplified by corrupt boosting into displacing appealing content, such a trend can only diminish the long-term influence, impact and appeal of mass and social media. Daily life in Yercaud. William Wildblood. More on my life in India, in the 1980s. Our life in Yercaud was simple. We rose at 6:00 every morning, had a drink of hot lime juice and honey and then meditated for around 45 minutes. After that it was breakfast, which was porridge and toast with a cup of tea. Then I generally worked in the garden or sorted out whatever needed to be sorted out in the guest house. After lunch, which I cooked and was basically the same every day, yellow dal with a mix of vegetables such as onion, brinjal, aubergine or eggplant, tomatoes, potatoes, lady's fingers, okra, and a leafy green vegetable similar to spinach called kirai, all served with rice. Michael had a nap and I read for an hour or so before going back to garden and or guest house duties. I flavored this concoction with a teaspoonful of curry powder. Indians rarely use curry powder. We found a large black granite mortar and pestle in the bungalow when we moved in. This was what the lady of the house used to grind spices every morning, but it remained idle while we were its custodians. You might wonder how, if Indians rarely use curry powder, we got hold of it. The answer is we bought it from a spice shop in Salem, the large town in the plains below Yercaud, where it probably only existed for decadent lazybones like us. A spice shop in India is a lovely thing. Full of strange and exotic smells obviously, but the array of various fresh and dried and powdered plants and roots and seeds and leaves and fruits, either hanging on strings or in sacks or contained in glass jars, makes it a visual treat too. Many other shops were similarly aesthetically pleasing, see the photos below. Traditionally, Indians led lives that were almost like works of art in their simplicity and elegance, though that time is passing now, a victim of modernization and democracy. I may be accused of glamorizing poverty to regret this, but there is a spiritual poverty that is more degrading than any material poverty that is not absolute penury. Later on in the afternoon I would go for a walk of a few miles in the hills and local jungle, and then in the early evening Michael and I went shopping at the village bazaar. There was a vegetable market which mostly involved the vendors spreading their wares on a sack while they sat cross-legged to one side. A few people had stalls, but many just sold one or two types of produce, onions, tomatoes, whatever, all grown in the area. We caused much amusement by buying a single onion every day, but it suited us to do a daily shop. We then went to the baker, where we were the only people who wanted wholemeal bread. We would buy the wheat in unground form from a state government supplier, and the baker would then grind it and make us a loaf every day. He only had white flour himself and could not understand why we wanted brown bread, but was happy to indulge the foreigners with their strange tastes. In similar vein, it was hard to get brown rice. For that we had to go to Salem to a wholesale rice merchant in the town. Food shops did not stock it. The next stage on our regular shop was a trip to Mr. Padma's. Mr. Padma ran a general grocery store where we bought everything that wasn't vegetables, bread, fruit or eggs, or a few other things I will come to later. So, items like tea, soap, tinned cheese, yes, tinned cheese, it wasn't bad, and champion porridge oats. We would always have a chat with Mr. Padma, who would stand by the entrance to his shop surveying the scene outside as though he were above it all. He was of a higher caste than the other shopkeepers, and he made sure people understood this. not in an arrogant way but simply as someone who wished to preserve the necessary formalities of life. The last call on our shopping trip was to buy eggs. Our dinner every night was the same thing: 2 boiled eggs with a couple of slices of bread followed by curds, banana and honey, all sourced locally like practically everything else. We made the curds ourselves from a culture we had been given. Each evening we had a delivery of milk from Major Manuel, an ex-Indian Army man who had retired to Yercaud. He had one cow which was milked at 6 p.m. precisely every day. His servant then brought us a litre or whatever it was for a couple of rupees. We knew that Major Manuel did not water his milk, whereas if you bought milk in the village it would have had water added as a matter of course. We then boiled the milk to sterilize it, and when it had cooled down to a certain temperature, still warm but no longer hot, we added half of it to a teaspoon of culture we had preserved from the previous day. You could do this for months until you had to get a new culture. When that had started to set, we transferred it to a small clay pot which we put in the fridge. Except we didn't have a fridge. What we had instead, and what we called our fridge, was another clay pot, large this time. It was actually 2 pots, one of which was placed inside the other. You put the item you wished to keep cool in the smaller of the 2 and then poured cold water into the larger before placing the smaller pot inside that and putting on a lid. This was surprisingly effective when kept in the pantry, a windowless room just off the kitchen with a tall ceiling and thick walls to keep out the heat. For a day or 2 anyway. I was learning a bit of Tamil at this time though, as I discovered later when I tried to show off to a cultured Brahmin in Madras. The Tamil I learnt was of a very crude sort. It would come out as something like, for an English equivalent, "Hello mate, how you doin'?" I had bought a dictionary that used the Roman alphabet since I never got to grips with the Tamil, but my accent and sentence structure came from interacting with local villagers, so left a good deal to be desired. Nonetheless, I thought my vocabulary was reasonable. So when I bought the eggs for dinner I would ask for nalo mitai, which means 4 eggs. There were always several young men behind the counter and they would all laugh and smile before giving me the eggs. I thought they were just being friendly. This went on for several months until the more senior of the servers, who spoke English, decided to intervene. He explained that the reason they all laughed every time I asked for eggs was that I was actually asking for 4 sweets. Eggs was mutai, not mitai. I no longer smile at foreigners who mispronounce English. The milk for the curds came from Major Manuel. The honey we added to the curds came from a local cooperative. This was run by our friend Therian Matthews, and he was the one who suggested that I should keep bees myself. As we had a garden full of flowers, this seemed a good idea. I started with a couple of hives, just wooden boxes with rectangular frames in which the bees would make their honeycombs, and I was given a swarm to get me going. I've written about this before, so won't repeat myself here except to reproduce the 2 pictures I have that relate to the subject of honey. This is a photo of me with the beekeepers cooperative. Major Manuel is second from the right in the front row, and Therian Matthews is the mafioso-like figure at the center, which is generally where he liked to be. Therian was a tremendous egotist and did sometimes behave like a godfather, but I liked him because he was a larger-than-life character and full of energy and enthusiasm. He always wore a little woolen hat as in the picture, even in the hottest weather, presumably because he was completely bald. He had a loud booming voice which he employed in church to add a descant to hymns that practically drowned out the rest of the congregation singing the main melody. Therian and his wife Elizabeth were Syrian Christians from Kerala, but they attended the Anglican-affiliated Church of South India services, which Michael and I also went to on most Sundays. He had worked for Nestlé and had traveled quite extensively in Europe during the course of his career, so had a sophistication that most people in the area, even the educated ones, lacked. He and Elizabeth were always kind to us, even if they did help themselves to quite a large sum of Michael's money when we left Yercaud, but that's another story. This picture shows me in our garden in front of flowering coffee plants which produce a very distinctive flavored honey. In the background are some banana plants. I am in my Sunday best because I had just come from church. The tie was a present from Elizabeth, not necessarily one I would have chosen myself. The trousers come from a suit I had made in the village by the local tailor. I think it cost a few pounds, including material, and a rather fancy blue lining for the jacket. I mentioned we bought wheat to give to the baker to make our wholemeal bread. At that time in Tamil Nadu certain items were rationed and we had to get them from a government store. These included wheat and sugar and also kerosene, which was useful for cooking and to put in lamps when there were power cuts, which was a frequent occurrence. We bought the wheat in the form of whole grain, which we would have to spread out in the sun and then sift for the small stones there would always be present. Whether to increase its weight or just part of the harvesting process I never knew, but I suspected the former, as we had to do the same for dal and rice. Once we had sifted out the stones, we took the wheat to the baker, who made us a fresh loaf every day. Roughly once a week we caught a bus down to Salem to buy those few things we needed that were not available in Yercaud, and also just for the pleasure. Salem was a bustling town, typical of South India, and still largely traditional in temperament and appearance. There were very few high-rise buildings and almost everyone wore Indian rather than Western clothes, saris for women, dhotis or lungis for men. It was not on the tourist trail, as there were no particularly interesting temples there as in towns like Madurai or Tanjavur, but in a way that made it more interesting. I hardly ever saw another Westerner there, and we were figures of curiosity. Here are a few pictures to give a flavor of a South Indian town at that time. I believe they were taken in 1982 by Michael's cousin when he came out to visit us. When we got back from our shopping trip, we had another 45-minute meditation, which was followed by a light dinner, some more reading, and then bed by 10. There was no TV or radio for the first couple of years, though Michael did eventually get a tiny transistor so he could listen to the news on the BBC World Service each morning. I got quite used to the Lillibolero theme tune and the announcement that it was 02 hours Greenwich Mean Time. The only TV I saw in 5 years was of some athletics at the 1984 Olympics, which I watched at the Yercaud Club, an institution I shall return to in a later post. It's Christmas, and in England that means compulsory rucking futter. Bruce Charlton. There is a composer of church music, including some Christmas carols and songs, called John Rutter, and it is mandatory that at least one of his songs must be performed in every Christmas concert throughout England, as well as in every evensong in every cathedral every week. Rutter was very prolific, and his work is of a consistent standard, and that standard is May. His music is not terrible, but it is never much good. Rutter seems to have been around forever, or maybe that is just what his music makes me feel. Yet apparently the old cove is still with us, and only 80 years old. How he achieved such a vice-like grip on Anglican choral music, I'm not sure, but my suspicion is that he has incriminating photographs of every vicar in the Church of England. Being a Christian is hierarchically above practicing any specific religion. Bruce Charlton. It seems to me that Christianity, as I understand it, is qualitatively different from religion. I regard Christianity as in essence the commitment to accept Jesus Christ's offer of resurrected eternal life in heaven, through following Jesus post-mortally. For a Christian, therefore, life after death involves both a personal transformation, resurrection, and also, implicitly, a qualitatively different existence in a heaven that is understood in terms of a second creation, a creative heaven entirely motivated by love, and without death, entropy or evil. This postmortal expectation therefore provides a frame for everything else in reality, and especially for this mortal life of ours. But Christianity does not fill our mortal life. Being a Christian does not provide us with a blueprint, rule book, ethical code, or detailed external and objective guidance for all important matters. In other words, properly grasped, it seems that being a Christian is not really a specific religion. The religion aspect of life has been provided by many and various churches through history and today, some of which churches include following Jesus to resurrected life in heaven as a core element, and these are validly Christian churches, but who all in addition offer various and detailed blueprints for daily living. Guidance overlaps among validly Christian churches, but it also varies. But each church offers, to a significant degree, that specific and detailed life guidance in terms of principles, practices, necessary obediences etc. which religiously inclined people seek, and that complex societies and civilizations required in order to function, and be sustainable. What I am saying is that being a Christian is distinct from being religious, because being a Christian focuses on what happens after we die, while a religion focuses on what we do during this mortal life. I am also saying that the relationship between the direct Christianity of what happens after we die, and the blueprint religion of what we do in this mortal life, is indirect and uncertain. On the one hand, Christianity itself does not have many very hard entailments, and on the other hand, most of the multitude of detail in rule books, ethical codes, and theologies lacks any solid basis in Christianity. The true relationship between Christianity and religion is that Christianity comes hierarchically first, above all else, and is the framework for understanding our life and ultimate reality. Within that framework of aspiration and faithful expectation, there will inevitably need to be something like a religion. But the scope and details of any religion, even a genuinely Christian religion, are not and cannot be an entailed consequence of Christianity. Note added, this does not mean that all religions, or even all validly Christian and self-identified Christian churches, are equally valid. Some will be more Christianity compatible than others. But it does mean that one could probably be a Christian, i.e. by intending to accept the post-mortal offer of Jesus Christ, while practicing a pretty wide range of religions. And this was, of course, the actual situation among the earliest Christians, before a distinct Christian church religion arose, who, after conversion, seem to have continued practicing, for example, their Jewish, Samaritan and Roman pagan religions. AI ethics scaremongering is part of the totalitarian PSYOP. Bruce Charlton. The global establishment AI project began almost exactly 3 years ago, with the multinational, multi-pronged, coordinated mega launch on November 30, 2022. The AI project has, of course, like all such, tried to capture both of the side of the debate, by using some portion of its multi-trillion-dollar budget to fund courses, qualifications, conferences, books, and jobs, that purport to discuss the ethics of this technology. Some of these AI employees are techno-utopian apologists for AI while others have the task of scaremongering. AI scaremongering is done in such a way that the realities of this vast totalitarian project are obscured, and the categorically false assertions of AI are instead simply being assumed to be true, by being used as the basis for the scaremongering. In other words, the discourse variously called AI ethics, like the related field of AI governance, is part of the PSYOPs that attempts, and successfully, it seems, to manipulate the masses into a state of bemused, terrified, passive and resigned acceptance of whatever bad things AI brings. Some of the ethicists base their concern on evaluations of what is coming very soon. These include assumptions that are smuggled in covertly, because they form the taken-for-granted basis of the ethical hand-wringing. 1. Inevitability. 2. Takeover from humans. 3. Destruction caused by the technology. The assumption of inevitability hides the unimaginable trillions of tax dollars confiscated from the masses to fund the AI project, its massive computational infrastructure, the massive energy consumption, the countless reallocated and recruited AI personnel in innumerable organizations. And to bribe/force compliance upon all the major social institutions and corporations by a vast and coordinated program. The assumption that AI will take over from humans hides that all actual decisions to, allegedly, replace people with computers are made by humans. Yet the background assumption is that this planned takeover of human activities by AI technologies will, somehow, happen because of the technology's innate alleged power. The simple fact is that people make the decision, and when these humans' decisions lead to AI takeover, this is because that human choice has been heavily propagandized, incentivized, by subsidies, tax breaks etc., driven by legislation changes, and so forth. If AI is in any sense inevitable, then that inevitability is merely because enough people will respond to the enormous pressures and incentives that have been created via the colossal funding of the project and the compliance of the leadership class. Destruction, software is stated to be the cause of the inevitable, i.e. planned, personal and social damage confidently predicted to result from the takeover of AI. This tries to hide that the whole process of AI replacing has been driven and enforced, top to bottom, by people. And this includes the common appeal to market forces and geopolitical competition, that supposedly compel corporations and governments to implement AI technology, or else be overwhelmed by those who adopt AI. This assumes what is false, that AI really does or soon will replace humans more efficiently and effectively in significant functional roles. It also takes no account that the market for AI has been deliberately and artificially constructed by totalitarian fiat using coercively confiscated resources. If the marketplace had instead been orientated towards effectiveness and efficiency in achieving real-world outcomes, then it would not, indeed could not, have led to AI. So, the AI project serves to conceal and deny a vast program of, yes, inevitable. If the totalitarian establishment get their way, planned personal and societal harm, undercover that all this has been done by the A.I.apostrophe, and in a way that is unstoppable and impersonal. In a way that is nobody's fault. No person or group is to blame for anything. It all just happened. And how sad, say the AI ethicists. The lie is that this is not really people who are doing the destroying by means of a colossal organized and resourced international strategy, but instead it is the software that is doing this to us humans. When we suffer or die, we are meant to cry out from our hearts, "Woe is me, my heart bleeds." But what can mere men do against such impersonal necessity? Behind the advertised ethical concern lies a raft of made-up, dishonest and propagandistic assertions about the functional efficiency and effectiveness of, post-November 2022, AI. The truth of these assertions is another thing which is assumed, in the face of a complete lack of serious and honest evidence, and fundamentally rooted in the categorical impossibility of the claims. My point here is clarify that those who are put forward in mainstream discourse as ethically concerned by the implications of A.I.apostrophe, including those who scaremonger on the basis of false assumptions concerning the technology's effectiveness and impersonal inevitability, are themselves part of the coordinated AI PSYOPs. It seems that AI project, in all its facets, has been the primary, single largest and most sustained, strategy of the globalist leadership class over the past 3 years. AI is the current main mechanism of progressing harmonic evil, those in the leadership class who desire a wholly materialist society of omni-surveillance and micro-control. Meanwhile, since early 2022, the agents of chaos, who pursue the spiteful and destructive agenda of Sorothic evil, have been focusing their efforts on escalating everywhere wars abroad plus intranational violence at home. Although these two types of evil are increasingly in conflict among the leadership class of the world, they seem to have reached an uneasy truce on the subject of AI based on opposite understandings of what AI will actually do. The totalitarians, falsely, believe that AI can be the basis of a world administering bureaucracy that is both cheaper and more controllable than the current armies of managers and clerks. On the other side, the agents of chaos, correctly, realize that AI cannot, therefore will not, perform this functional job, but will instead destroy social functioning, generate mass misery and death, and collapse civilization into that disorder they crave. So, at present, both sides of the global establishment have reasons to continue to facilitate, fund, and propagandize the ongoing AI takeover, which is why you never hear an establishment voice that is critical of AI for the right reasons and from the right assumptions. Why monetizing corrupts? Bruce Charlton. Setting aside arguments about economic necessity, which very seldom hold water, it is surely a blazingly obvious fact that monetizing of blogs and videos, by whatever means, is corrupting. We can all see this for ourselves, especially if there is a before and after, even when the scale of earnings is, presumably, negligible. Indeed, this is what is striking, that even a small-scale blog video is distorted in predictable ways by monetization. In other words, monetization induces and enforces this worldly short-termism in service to the mainstream agenda. The mechanism of corruption is analogous to that which leads to the convergence that afflicts all charities in the UK, and I mean all charities, which is that engagement with the system, in this case the economy, is intrinsically corrupting. Which means, of course, that we are all more or less corrupted by the fact that we all depend on the system for our survival. That is true. But it is also true that every time we choose to increase our integration with the system, we increase our corruption. We can negate such spiritual harm if we explicitly acknowledge to ourselves, in particular, that we have chosen to do what corrupted us because it seemed more expedient, i.e. if we take personal responsibility for our corrupting choice, and acknowledge too that we have actually become more corrupt as a result of our choices. In other words, we are all sinners and cannot cease from sinning and indeed often choose to sin more and gratuitously. But what usually happens is that we lie to ourselves, first that we have to engage with and subordinate to the system in this particular instance, and that it won't make any difference. With monetization, it takes the form of justifying that we deserve to be paid for the input of our time and effort. Okay, but that means we are selling our time and effort, even when we get very little back from that sale, and we cannot validly then claim that we are writing, or otherwise creating, in pursuit of truth, beauty and virtue. In sum, as of 2025, with our national and global totalitarian system, if you are writing for money then you are, to a significant degree, writing for money, writing so as to be more compatible with making money, hence you have chosen to place your writing and its content within the totalitarian system. One sign of corruption is when the writing engages with the monetization, another when the writing becomes PR for other system-affiliated activities, selling books or other merchandise, supporting your business, or promoting yourself, your career, your worldly projects. All that's fine if you support the evil-motivated actuality and aims of the global totalitarian system. In that case you presumably want to become more corrupt, and selling your writing, or using your writing to sell, will help with this. But insofar as you desire to take the side of God, divine creation and the good, then the decision to monetize your writing is one that will surely have adverse consequences on you personally, relative to how you otherwise would have been, and more so insofar as you try to deny this. To put it the other way around, if you are genuinely serious in your motivation of wanting to align with the divine and enable good via your writing, then you should avoid, insofar as possible, inserting an economic interface between your writing and those who may read it. In conclusion, I think we have recently reached a point when the old possibility of valid compromises between this world and the spirit have broken down. Things have come to a point. We must make choices one way or the other. The choice whether or not to monetize one's writing is only one of these choices, but it is one of these choices. If one is writing for money, in order to live, then it should be considered whether money may be got some other way, so as to liberate the writing. There are few less efficient ways of making money than writing, so that a smaller amount of some other kind of work will nearly always make money more reliably and efficiently than monetizing the writing. Also, most of the best writers in history have been amateurs who made money from some other work than writing, and their best writing was done without expectation of payment, even if that writing later made some, or a lot of, money. AI is a magic 8-ball, i.e. obfuscated dice roll or coin flip. Bruce Charlton. The current primary global strategy for replacing people with AI programs amounts to the substitution of a magic 8-ball for human judgment. This statement is hardly an exaggeration. The magic 8-ball is actually a yes-no dice with a verbal output, which is indeed just an elaborated coin flip. To set up the analogy with AI here are three aspects of the magic 8-ball mechanism. 1. Functionally, magic 8-ball is an obscuration and complication of a simple device for generating positive and negative responses. A child does not realize that the relative complexity of operation functions to confuse the user about what would otherwise be obvious. And the verbal nature of responses, for example as I see it, yes, don't count on it, merely provide a more human-like output than would numbers or symbols. 2. The other point of the 8-ball is that it is supposed to be magic. In other words, the magic 8-ball user has had the idea planted that the ball is something like sentient, conscious, has innate wisdom, and even predictive power. 3. Finally, the complexity of the structure enables much more money to be charged for the device than if it was a die or a coin. The analogy between the magic 8-ball and the global totalitarian AI project is very close. 1. The colossal computational complexity of AI obscures that it does not understand anything, any more than does a magic 8-ball. And AI in its post-November 30th 2022 iteration, has been specifically engineered to generate pseudo-relevant, human-like verbal outputs. 2. By means of a vast propaganda PSYOP, AI has been attributed with magical powers of intelligence, wisdom, creativity etc., so that people are inclined to treat its output as having, or very soon about to have, literally superhuman capabilities. 3. Nobody would pay much for dice, but the global establishment have spent many trillions of dollars, of our money, in AI technologies and its infrastructure, which, functionally, merely amounts to an 8-ball on steroids with plastic surgery, of which most has gone into the pockets of pseudo-investors, with significant sums spread among their managers, propagandists and minions. The question arises as to what will happen if or when significant decision-making is taken from humans and given to the output of a Giga Magic 8-ball. The answer depends on whether the real decision-makers, i.e. the ones who chose to develop the obfuscation in the first place, and who oversee its implementation, take any notice of the AI decisions, or just make their own decisions as usual, but pretend that the AI was responsible. This seems the likely intended scenario. But maybe, instead, many people really will believe their own propaganda. It surely looks like it, and the magic 8-ball will actually, in real life, be used to generate decisions that humans will then obey. And maybe the leadership class of the world will allow or encourage this to happen, probably from motivations such as spite, sadism and destructive zeal, and will sit back in their secure and provisioned shelters, cackling at having so grossly fooled so many people, to enjoy the show of what eventuates. In which case, civilization will crumble and collapse. And more rapidly than would otherwise be the case. Magic 8-ball is a 20-sided dice suspended in fluid, which is shaken, and then provides 10 yes and 5 no themed verbal answers. The other 5 answers are essentially roll again. All of which ultimately reduces to a die with only yes/no responses, in this case, double the proportion of yes than no answers, which could further be reduced to coin flips. Food. William Wildblood. In his book Mere Christianity, first published in 1952 but deriving from lectures given during the Second World War, C.S. Lewis has a chapter entitled Sexual Morality in which he considers what the Christian approach should be to this vexed subject, and specifically the virtue of chastity. He was writing before the sexual revolution of the 1960s, but that didn't come out of nowhere and really just meant that what had been going on, or at least discussed, in certain circles of society spread throughout the whole of it. Lewis makes the point that the sexual instinct, good and natural in itself, has gone wrong, and says that Christianity does not believe that sex is bad, an accusation often aimed at it, but that the state into which the sexual instinct has got is the problem. It has become corrupted, and that is what is bad. Something often forgotten is that the idea of romantic love only really developed in the Christian West, and if that love was idealized on occasion, it could be said that this reflected the sense that the human love between a man and a woman could be lifted up into the Christian heaven and, as a result, transformed into a divine state. But this piece is not about sex. In the course of this chapter, Lewis illustrates the degenerated state of the sexual instinct by the example of a striptease act where men gather to ogle a woman undressing. He says, suppose you went to a country where you could draw a crowd by slowly lifting the lid off a plate of mutton chops or bacon. Wouldn't you think there was something wrong with the people of that country, and that the normal healthy appetite for food had become exaggerated and corrupted? He writes this in the sure knowledge that his audience would think it absurd. But this is more or less what we have today. Our excessive preoccupation with food shows itself everywhere. The number of restaurants and fast food outlets on every high street, the constant advertisements for all things edible, the TV schedules with their endless programs about food and competitions for those who cook or bake it, the lionizing of chefs as though they were great artists. We have become obsessed with food, not so much from the point of view of our stomachs as from that of our taste buds and the desire to stimulate them unceasingly. This is a sure sign of decadence. There is nothing wrong with enjoying food. One should enjoy it. It is one of the comforts God has given us to make life in the physical world more bearable. But there is a difference between healthy enjoyment and gluttony, and we have forgotten the age-old truth that indulging the pleasures of the flesh deadens us to the spiritual. The body is part of what we are, but if we give it too much prominence, it will become all of what we are, and that is what our modern obsession with food is doing. I'm not recommending we put on hair shirts and live on stale bread and water, even if that is a good practice sometimes. It's a question of priorities and proportion, and we have gone much too far down the road of physical indulgence. There is a decadent sensuality where food is concerned, just as there is in the case of sex, and it too is spiritually destructive. The pleasures of the body have their place, but that place in a spiritually aware culture is a subordinate one. The more attention you pay to these pleasures, the more you try to cultivate them or seek to stimulate the desires associated with them, the more you lose all connection to the spiritual. Man is not an animal, but if he indulges the animal side of his nature, something animals don't do, he sinks lower than the animal because he has sinned against both spirit and nature. Food is good, but a good exaggerated or given a place above its merits becomes an evil. This is what has happened with food in our world. There was an episode recently when a well-known journalist and media personality opined that the pleasures of foreign cuisine was compensation for the indigenous people to effectively lose their country. The spiritual state of such an individual is pitiful. Possible in principle, some paranormal phenomena should be regarded as aspects of baseline reality. Bruce Charlton. I recently reviewed Andy Thomas's book about the paranormal experiences reported by ordinary people. It is a common response to such reports to demand a plausible scientific explanation, but I would assert that several paranormal phenomena do not require any explanation, because they are natural and spontaneous aspects of normal human experience. As such, they ought to be regarded as baseline aspects of real life, rather than things that are unacceptable unless explained in terms of what is 2025 mainstream acceptable, i.e. regarded as valid by official bureaucracies and legacy mass media. Thomas's list of the strange phenomena covered in his book include 1. Ghosts and poltergeists. 2. UFOs. 3. Out-of-body and near-death experiences. 4. Psychic phenomena, such as telepathy. 5. Premonitions. 6. Synchronicities. 7. Crop circle events. 8. Prehistoric site events, stone circles, etc. 9. Sighting of cryptids or anomalous creatures. Of these, I would regard ghosts, poltergeists, psychic experiences, premonitions and synchronicities, as being, broadly speaking, merely natural and spontaneous phenomena. These are the sort of thing, albeit without applying such categories to them, of a kind that it is likely to happen to pretty much all young children and tribal peoples. They are something that ought, therefore, to be regarded as normal, even if unusual, aspects of everyday life. They are indeed, not merely normal, but a kind of baseline for human beings. These can be part of the background assumptions with which we enter this life, and which it is unnatural and distorting for us to discard as impossible on the basis of currently acceptable theories. What is normal and baseline does not need to be explained before being accepted as potentially valid. By contrast, phenomena like UFOs and crop circles are much more restricted, by persons, and by location, in terms of experiences. In other words, UFOs and crop circles are not necessarily, although they may sometimes be, normal happenings, and often seem absent from the experiences of many people and cultures. They are also theoretically constructed phenomena, in the sense that defining them requires significant background knowledge. To perceive a UFO implicitly requires an idea of what is normal in the skies, which is something that must be learned. And crop circles are usually often properly apprehended from above, or by walking through fields of corn to find them, which, agriculturally, doesn't usually happen. But to return to the normal paranormal phenomena like telepathy, feeling the presence of spirits, perhaps of the dead, out-of-body traveling, actions by invisible beings and the like. These should be accepted as possible in principle and therefore not requiring explanation, even though some, or most, specific claims of such occurrences may be mistaken or dishonest. I mean that we ought not to demand some kind of explanation of how such things can occur, before believing them. To repeat, we should work on the basis that reports of ghosts or telepathic events, for instance, are a possibility, on the basis that it is natural to believe in ghosts, and to experience telepathy. We can then evaluate reports on the basis of the honesty and credibility of witnesses, and specific contextual details of the report, as with any other second-hand information. After all public knowledge is derived from eyewitness testimony. Nations have, for example, gone to war on the basis of credible reports of enemy military activities from, for example, competent and trustworthy naval captains. Why then should we doubt the same kind of people when they report a sea serpent, or some other cryptid? We do not need, and should not demand, an upfront and satisfactory explanation of how ghosts are possible and what they are made of. And likewise the possibility of telepathy does not require an explanation of how it might happen. I would go further. To take the example of telepathy, or the experience mind-to-mind contact of knowing another being's intentions, nature, etc., actual experience may go far beyond, or actually contradict, mainstream scientific understanding of what is possible. Thus, I think it likely that our basic experience of telepathy is one where it is not just humans that are telepathically known, but potentially other animals, plants, and even things such as planets and stars. Yet, the telepathic experience of contact is one that is instantaneous contact. There is no time lag, even over very large, or vast, distances, such as would be the case with planets and stars. In other words, telepathy, when valid, is apparently not constrained either by the speed of light or by problems of translation. We just know, directly, without mediation, what is happening in another being now. Such experience is, of course, contrary to the assumed constraints of current physics, and indeed contrary to how it is assumed that any communication must occur, for example needing an encoder, transmitter, receiver, decoder, etc. In this sense, the implications of some paranormal experiences are profound and wide-ranging, because accepting their validity entails that reality is qualitatively different from that described by current science and affirmed as valid by official authorities. In other words, the acceptance of the validity of some paranormal phenomena is subversive with respect to the claims of our society and civilization to be sole arbiters of what is real and true, and whose evaluations we ought to believe and obey. This is probably one major reason why paranormal experiences, including those that are normal to the point of being almost universal, have not so far been, and probably never shall be, regarded as real, true, serious, and sometime important. Experience is more significant than knowledge, but what kind of experience? Bruce Charlton. Experience is greater than knowledge. Reality is greater than truth. Thinking is greater than feeling. The above are notations or summaries of what may be chosen as ways of understanding the human condition, including mortal life, on the basis of metaphysical decisions. The intent is that the first term is distinct from and superior to the second, but that the second is usually preferred. More people focus on knowledge, including, nowadays, the debased forms of information or even data. I am suggesting that these are secondary forms, without participation. Knowledge is about something, and the tendency is to regard it as abstract and separable from the person who knows. But I am saying that the only real knowledge is in, or from, the experience of the knower. All knowledge includes the subjective, the knower. Knowledge is not all in the knower, but always includes the knower. It could be stated that what we really know must always be a matter of our experience. Truth is only a partial view of reality, because reality is what is, whereas truth is a description of what is. This relates to my conviction that the most fundamental philosophy is metaphysics, which is concerned with the nature of basic reality. Any stated metaphysics, any philosophy, is of course, secondary and therefore a description of something, not the something itself. but underneath that ought to be a direct experience of reality. That personal experience should be the basis of the knowledge that is metaphysics. Against this is the idea that the most fundamental philosophy is epistemology, the philosophy of knowledge, which is often focused on asking what are the valid criteria of knowing, or how can knowledge become objective. I regard epistemology as a blind alley. Having said that personal experience is primary, and that experience of reality is the basis of that philosophy I aspire to, the question arises as to the nature of that experience. What kind of experience is sought? Well, here I am suggesting that it is a kind of thinking, rather than a kind of feeling. Although having said that, the kind of thinking includes feeling. In other words, the ultimate activity is not the sort of mundane voice in my head thinking in which most people engage most of the time that they are awake and conscious. Neither is it intense unthinking feeling, of the kind that most people regard as powerful emotions, the feeling that is driven by some external event or input, and that overwhelms us. Instead, I am attempting to describe a feeling thinking, a feeling reinforced thinking, perhaps. Attaining its objective of experiencing reality in a direct and primary way independent of words, or pictures. What I hope to get across is that we should regard conscious and purposive thinking, a particular kind of thinking, as the situation in which we may experience reality directly. This conviction, which I derived from Rudolf Steiner, with modifications, is very different from many almost religious or spiritual ideas about where and how we may encounter truth, and different too from mainstream scientific materialism. It is neither the subjective and passive revelation or imposition of truth in traditional religions, recurring obedience to legitimate church authority. Nor is it the idea of truth as objective and out there, something established by experts that we can only passively obey. Nor is it the my truth subjectivism of New Age affectations. I say affectation because nobody remotely lives up to it, but instead New Agers are relativistic about their spirituality, which is regarded in a lifestyle way, while being serious and objective about the truths of current leftist politics, which they regard as mandatory, and opposition to which is the only evil they, in practice, recognize and oppose with vehemence. A new Aga may be relativistic about which religion is true, or anything goes concerning the validity of spiritual practices, such as acupuncture, crystals, channeling, meditation etc., but highly objective and very coercive in their opinions about right-wing politicians, or fundamentalist Christians, and what ought to be done with / about them. The idea that we need to experience reality, and that reality may be experienced in thinking, is therefore something qualitatively different from any of the mainstream perspectives. I can only point it out as a possibility. Whether you, or anyone else, chooses to adopt such a point of view, is, and can only be, a matter for individual spiritual responsibility. A matter of your ultimate freedom. Owning Change, and AI. Bruce Charlton. Current attitudes to AI are an example of the way that hierarchical power elicits compliance, by psychological methods and the hope of personal benefit. This is seen in organizations, when management talk about earning change. The desired change, i.e. currently, the implementation of AI technologies, is presented as, and may actually be, inevitable. Therefore the choice presented to those upon whom change is being imposed, is either to suffer the, asserted, humiliation of being compelled kicking and screaming into compliance, and thereby having one's helplessness revealed to all and sundry. Or else owning the change, which means accepting its inevitability and adjusting one's own psychology to embrace the valuation that this change is good. Or, at least, that the change can be made good. Or, at least such change can be made good for me. The psychological appeal is obvious. Instead of being visibly subject to miserable compulsion, one who owns the change can pretend to be in control of the process, and happy about it. And, by pretending the change is good, one can, with a superficially clear conscience, make the best of it for oneself, in pursuit of money, status, attention, sex, or whatever motivates. One who owns change can ride the wave, be a cool surfer, instead of one upon whom the wave crashes. Indeed, owning change is almost wholly to the short term and this worldly benefit of those who can perform this psychological act, which is why the process is so common as to be nigh universal. Owning change is just seen as common sense, making the best of the inevitable. Pretending to oneself that evil is actually good, until we actually do believe that evil is good. And surely nobody can be blamed for doing that. Word spells from theoretical models, how something is supposed to work, versus how it actually works. Bruce Charlton. People's understanding of the world around them is substantially a matter of their explanatory models, to the point that experience and observations are essentially ignored. For example, there is a model for how democracy works, then there is what actually happens. And people continue, decade after decade, to believe in the theory rather than their observations and experiences of what actually happens. Same with laws and regulations, there is a model of what these are supposed to be aiming at, and our observations concerning how the law/rule is actually deployed in practice, which may be very different indeed, and yet the law/rule continues, usually successfully, to be defended on the basis of the theoretical model. Likewise with technology, there is the explanatory model of how some bit of technology is supposed to work, and then there are our observations about what it actually does. From which may sometimes be inferred that the bit of kit is not, and never was, and never could, be working in the manner of the model. AI is a topical instance of this. Another example from medicine, is that once a drug has been marketed as an antidepressant, then people, doctors as well as patients, cannot seem grasp that drugs thus classified can and do cause depression, and suicide, in some patients. The consequences of the Birdemic lockdowns and PEC were another example of the same phenomenon. Most people believed that theory that these would help, and apparently could not grasp that they would inevitably cause harm, even if they also helped, which, in the event, they did not. But these are just specific examples. This way of thinking permeates our lives right down to the deepest levels. Consider ideologies such as feminism. People still talk about feminism as if it was 1880, and this was a new theory that must work and is intrinsically a good thing. A century and a half of actual personal experiences makes no apparent difference. The same applies by close analogy to socialism or racism. Religions are the same as ideology in this respect. Once a model of reality of a religion is accepted, nothing could ever happen that would necessarily refute it. And the same applies to people, like the recent new atheists, who talk about the liberation of mankind from religion as if this was a new, untried theory of human happiness, that must surely work. When in actuality we already live, as did our grandparents and back, in the least religious society in the history of the world, and it is continually getting less religious. We are back at that old favorite theme upon which I repeatedly harp, that metaphysics is prior to science, that theory is prior to experiment, etc. This just is the reality of human existence. Totalitarian controllers are far more concerned about controlling the theoretical models by which we interpret the world, than they are about controlling specific information, because once the models are established, they cannot be refuted by any new information. Once someone has assumed that there is no God and this is a purposeless and meaningless universe, nothing can ever happen to compel him to recognize the reality of God, purpose or meaning. Everything possible can be explained away as random, the product of delusion or fraud, and so forth. Once somebody has decided that their church is blessed by God and can never be corrupted and will last until the end of time/last judgment, then no amount of corruption or evil done by that church and or its members will make any difference to the assumption. The lesson I draw from this is that we should be very careful what we assume. Because upon our theoretical models of reality depend our experience of reality. And we can only learn that which is learnable within the context of our assumptions. Therefore, we ought, as a minimum, to become, as far as possible, which can only be known by sustained trying, explicitly aware of our own assumptions of those models by which we understand and explain reality. Christ is qualitatively different to every other spiritual being. William Wildblood. It cannot be denied that every serious religion has produced its share of saintly men and women, and also that bad things have been done in the name of every religion. In both cases some more than others, but still the point stands. Does this mean that every religion is equally valid and that they all come from God and have the same divine stamp of approval? That they simply represent different expressions of divine truth and are intended for different groupings of people? My answer to this is a definite no. There is a hierarchy in religion as there is in everything else, and top of the hierarchy is Christianity. That is because Christ is the one perfect divine revelation, because he is indeed the Son of God and Savior of mankind. Most religions probably have some kind of divine input, and if they don't at the beginning, then they become influenced by truth from on high as they develop and grow. I say most, not all, because some now past and more localized are clearly demonic in origin. But of the great religions in the world which have spread significantly beyond their point of origin, I would say all contain in part the presence of God. He can be seen, again in part, through the window of the religion. However, this presence is always veiled except in the case of Christ, where it is seen directly. This is because Christ was not a prophet or avatar or incarnated spiritual being of some kind sent from God, all of which are in some degree limited if not contaminated by appearing in the world of matter. Christ was the pure essence of God, and there was no limitation or contamination in him. This is what without sin means. He was the naked truth of spirit shining directly, unimpeded by matter. And his teaching was twofold. First, there was the basic teaching, which in many ways was not dissimilar to other spiritual teaching, even if it was more direct and to the point. But then, and more importantly, there was his person. Christ taught through the medium of his person. He was, and is, the truth. And when he said no man comes to God except through him, that is also the truth. Now, Christ can appear in non-Christian religions through inhabiting with his spirit aspects of those religions, and this is why members of those religions can become saints if they follow the Christ-inhabited aspects of their religion. But, even so, this is not as direct an approach as through the image of Christ that has come down to us through scripture, tradition and art, all divinely inspired. But Christ also lives or can live in our hearts, and anyone can meet him there if they open themselves up to his holy person. This then transforms the individual from the worldly material self to a spiritual being. Furthermore, it is the only thing that can do that. Christ is qualitatively different to every other spiritual being because they partake of him, but he only partakes of himself. Why are modern people indifferent to eternal life? Bruce Charlton. I remember the answer to this question from personal experience, from remembering my earlier self. Modern people are indifferent to eternal life because it is pictured as more of the same, but forever. As nothing more than a continuation of this life, as it actually is experienced by modern people. which life is purposeless, meaningless, and ultimately isolated and disengaged. Why, asks a modern man, would it be regarded as good thing, eternally to continue a meaningless and purposeless existence? In other words, when my personal life is already pre-assumed to be something that just happened as a culmination of science and randomness. When my life exists against a backdrop of the universe is dead and going nowhere and I am a brief insignificant nothing within this vastness of time and space. This is the official conviction of our civilization, taught from the highest to lowest levels, by those with greatest status and conferred authority. And it forms the functional basis of all public and objective explanations and justifications from the major social institutions, politics, law, military, police, mass media, economics, science, medicine, arts, education, etc., and also the churches. When human life is regarded as thus futile, its continuation forever seems to most people like a prospect that would be more of a torment than a thing to be desired. In such a context, the core promise of Christianity has lost its appeal to the extent that most people think that, even if resurrected individual life beyond death could somehow be proved to be a real and genuine possibility, they wouldn't want it. And would prefer the supposed assurance of a swift and painless death, i.e. euthanasia, followed by utter annihilation of consciousness. Such is the depth of our modern sickness of soul. Too deep to be touched by evangelism or apologetics, too deep to be touched even by the devout practice of any strict church Christianity. Because the modern belief in purposelessness, and meaninglessness, and ultimate personal insignificance, is larger and more profound than our professed religions. Until we, as individuals, are able to build our religion on a foundation of ultimate reality having a direction, personal meaning, individual significance that we can choose from ourselves, then we shall not escape the vortex of modernity. How can modern people become sure enough about their beliefs, for this to be strongly motivating? Example from my earlier life as a scientist. Bruce Charlton. We need to be sufficiently sure of our bottom-line convictions that they will serve strongly to fuel our personal motivation, so that we have the clarity and courage to aim at good, and to discern and navigate through life. But we modern people, in this modern world, find it very hard to believe in anything. At least, we moderns don't believe in stuff strongly enough that we can be truly free, and choose God and divine creation, and have the courage to stick with this, in the face of a world that continually subverts, ridicules, suppresses, persecutes, and even inverts such intentions. We need true beliefs, i.e. beliefs that reflect reality, divine reality, and we also need to be subjectively sure about these beliefs in order that they can be positively motivating. So how can we discover, and become sufficiently convinced, by such things? The short answer is intuition, but I need to explain what I mean by intuition. For this I will here use the example of my earlier life as a scientist. When I began learning science, in the early phase, it was learning about science, and I learned it in just the same way that we learn most other things about this world. We are told it, we absorb it in terms of the assumptions that lie behind the functioning of our world. And we generally believe what we are told, especially when it comes from socially defined authority figures. But such early learning is superficial and passive, and such beliefs are not strongly held, not least because they have never really been understood, and we have never invested anything very personal into them. Consequently, these early beliefs concerning science were easily revised, modified, even reversed, when some higher authority said so. So, this early kind of passive and external belief about science was only very weakly inwardly motivating, and was unstable. The same applies to all such beliefs, and this accounts for almost all proclaimed political, social and religious beliefs. They are shallow, impersonal, and very easily redirected or reversed by a change in what authorities are currently saying. When I became a professional scientist, and began to do research, I entered an intermediate phase. I soon became much more discerning about what I believed, and more active in choosing who I would personally regard as authorities. My own understanding became deeper, albeit in externally derived terms. The doing of science became much more selective, but what I selected from, and the criteria for regarding something as true, was something I assembled from that selective sample of what authorities stated. I was not doing original or creative work in science, rather I was trying to be more professional, more discerning, and to do my work at a higher level than others. At this intermediate level, the work I was doing was not really anything to do with reality, rather it was dictated by the scientific literature, and was a matter of filling in gaps, extrapolating from what had already been done, and refuting pieces of established science that were, I believed, refuted by better authorities. It could be said I had faith in science as a process, as a social activity. This is analogous to most Christians' faith in their church. I changed my mind less often than in the early phase, because I was more motivated, but this motivation was very much bound up with and shaped by the professional scientific environment, which was regarded as the ultimate arbiter. So, at this intermediate level, science was what the best scientists were saying, or had said, and the intent was to become one of these best, and this was determined by the higher professional structures. Such a vision of science is this worldly, and its standards and motivations are of this world, even if rather idealized within this world. The motivations are stronger, because of the personal investment in the process, but the motivation is still ultimately external, and when the external consensus of those I regarded as best scientists changed, then so would my own purposes and motivations. I could, I hoped, stand in a select company which I had partially chosen to ally with, but I could not stand alone. The highest level of science was concerned by transcendental ideals that looked beyond the scientific milieu, ideals to do with reality, not just the relevant scientific literature, and truth, not just professional standards. At this highest level I was compelled to take personal responsibility for my beliefs, and might therefore need to stand alone when I thought that the external world of science, even of the best scientists, and by my evaluation, was wrong and misguided. For these evaluations to become beliefs that were strong enough to motivate, I needed to have criteria for conviction that went beyond my interpretations of the external world of the professional scientific literature. At this point, as may be clear, I had actually moved outside of the professional system of science. I had come to recognize that science had its assumptions that were not really true, that it was a matter of models not reality, and that for science to be true and real, required that science be understood in terms of ultimate reality, which included God and divine creation, and myself as having some personal significance in this. This was the point at which I developed sufficiently strong a personal motivation that I could, where I regarded it as necessary, maintain my convictions and direction without support from other scientists. I was, in other words, innerly motivated, and also, consequently, more strongly motivated. This stronger inner motivation came from a different quality of conviction concerning what was true. At the early and intermediate levels of science, I was dependent on external authority as expressed in external communications and externally validated interpretations of these communications, i.e. my belief, hence motivation, was rooted the observations and theories to be found in some selective sample of the scientific literature. To reiterate, this understands science as communications that are externally derived and externally validated. At both early and intermediate levels, my convictions could be no different from, deeper than, or more solid than these external factors. And when these external factors vacillated, or even apparently reversed, then there was no alternative but for me to revise my convictions. This situation is demotivating, especially when, by criteria external to science, and to do with truth and reality, science is being corrupted, as was very obviously the case. Science began explicitly to serve the needs of bureaucracy, careerism, politics, etc. I could not fool myself other than that this really was corruption. For me to have a personal conviction and motivation in science, I needed to have an inner sense of truth and reality. What is more, this inner sense needed to be direct, not a communication, needed to be self-interpreting, not dependent on observations and theories. In other words, intuition. Actually, I have put matters the word way around, because it was only after I had recognized that intuition was and ought to be the root of science, that I moved to the higher level. What happened was that I would be thinking about something, working on something, when I realized that this was it. From the stream of superficial thinking and doing, there sometimes emerged, there was discovered, a solid sense of conviction and surety, this is it. After a while, the intuition of this is it became the final validator of my work, unless I got it, and unless the sense of this is it was solid enough to survive repeated consultations, then I was not convinced. Lacking such an intuition, I remained unsure. I knew that more work was needed. But with this intuition, and so long as it lasted and was operative, I was highly motivated, and could withstand any amount of external contradiction. To generalize from this specific experience, when we regard the external world as corrupt, and increasingly taking the side of evil, then unless we are to be drawn into that, we need to move above considerations of the external, the communicated. We need, I think, to operate from the kind of deep intuition I eventually found in doing science. Because only this intuition can be the basis for us to be free and positively motivated by something out with society that is both solid and potentially real. The unlife assumption, the spiritual trap of assuming an unalive universe. Bruce Charlton. Nearly everybody nowadays, except young children, and maybe some residual tribal people, believes that the universe was originally unalive, and most of it is still unalive. And this is a shared assumption among mainstream modern materialists, and all of the major Western religions. The assumption that there was a time when the universe was just physics, biology came along much later, and consciousness later still. The addition of God doesn't make all that much difference, because God is supposed to have created unalive physics first, then plants, then animals, and only to have added conscious humans at the end of the process. So that the unalive world of physics is still asserted to be the first and predominant reality. Modern people, religious and atheistic, conceptualize themselves as islands of life, plus or minus consciousness, in a vast ocean of unlife. This unlife assumption is one of the iron chains that unbreakably binds modern man's soul to the ideology of atheistic materialism. Because the assumed possibility, and even worse predominance, of unlife, negates the divine in ways that are crippling. For instance, the unlife assumption renders the individual here and now powerless whenever that individual lacks the material power to change the unalive environment. The sheer mass of the unalive seems to be a colossal inertia, such that, with such a picture of reality in our minds, it feels like an individual spirit cannot overcome that mass. If the physics world of the unalive is given temporal priority and spatial predominance, i.e. the unalive came first and comprises most of reality, then the spiritual is thereby rendered secondary in importance and minority on influence. These assumptions make it very hard to believe, to convince ourselves, that the spiritual in me, for example here and now, can really affect the vast ocean of unlife in which I am supposed to be dwelling. Little me thinking versus all that stuff. How can I possibly make a significant difference? It is so hard to believe, because it is so hard to understand, we can't make sense of it. With such a world model we can't think of a plausible mechanism of action. Thus, the context of a prior and predominant unalive universe makes it very hard to grasp how the individual spirit, for example my own current conscious aspirations and commitments, really can and does make an ultimate difference to reality as a whole. Yet surely that is what Jesus taught us the truth. That what you or I think or want, here and now, can make an eternal and universal difference. It seems to me that we need to drop the assumption of an unalive universe, and to return to that assumption with which we entered the world, the assumption of all reality being alive and conscious, to various degrees. We need, therefore, to discard the physics, biology, humanity sequence of creation, whether that model comes from the Old Testament, or from science. If we can then, and it is difficult indeed, or, at least, I find it so, develop the original and true habit of regarding reality as alive, conscious, purposive, etc., then theism and Christianity begin to make understandable sense, we can grasp how the assertions may actually work. If we can recognize and discard the unlife assumption, can relearn to think of everything as alive, and thereby relegate physics to the realm of more, or less, expedient models, but never real reality, then I think we will find that claims and promises of Christianity can make a kind of obvious, common sense. After which clarity and grasp of understanding is attained, salvation becomes a simple matter of whether or not we personally want what Jesus offers. Note, the above is a different and somewhat novel way of describing the metaphysics of beings that I have been propounding on this blog and elsewhere, for the past several years. The most Christian element in Dickens is A Christmas Carol. Francis Berger. Many cite Scrooge's transformation and redemption through charity, selflessness and love, particularly as it pertains to helping the poor and downtrodden, as the most Christian element in Dickens's A Christmas Carol. The reasoning behind this interpretation hinges largely upon Jacob Marley's forlorn lament that, mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business, charity, mercy, forbearance, benevolence, were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. That most continue to identify Scrooge's radical embrace of the common welfare, charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence to something known as mankind as the most Christian element in Dickens's slim, ghostly tale reveals much about the spiritual state of Christianity in our modern world. There is no disputing that the common welfare, charity, forbearance, and benevolence are all Christian elements in their own right, however, they are, at best, low-level Christian elements. In many ways, they are practically indistinguishable from officially enforced and celebrated secular values, steeped in what can only be described as psychotic and suicidal altruism. Yet Scrooge's transformation from a cold-hearted miser to a warm-hearted benefactor of mankind remains the most Christian takeaway for most contemporary Christians. I refer to common welfare, charity, forbearance, and benevolence as low-level Christian elements, values, for this simple reason that such elements engage lower levels of the spirit, which perhaps helps explain how and why they can so easily be inverted and hijacked. Moreover, making charity and benevolence one's business also depends upon the integrity of one's deepest motivations, which, for Christians, should always be spiritual in nature. With that in mind, for me, the most Christian element in Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol is Cratchit's refusal to resent Scrooge. The refusal does not stem from ignorance or a lack of acknowledgement. Cratchit is under no illusions about Scrooge's maltreatment of him. He knows exactly who and what Scrooge is, yet he resists the temptation to resentment, despite his wife's outbursts at the dinner table. Despite everything. Modern and contemporary literary critics have often interpreted Cratchit's lack of resentment as the learned helplessness of the working poor trapped within an oppressive value system fortified by unjust societal norms. Thus, Cratchit's refusal to resent Scrooge amounts to little more than the resigned acceptance of limiting and unfair circumstances, revealing a severe lack of agency in any striving to be authentically free. Nothing could be further from the truth. On the contrary, Cratchit's refusal to resent Scrooge is a monumental display of agency and the striving to be authentically free. Moreover, it is, and in my mind shall forever remain, the most Christian of Christian elements in Dickens's A Christmas Carol, because it is the deepest element, spiritually speaking. The future belongs to those who show up is both pragmatically futile and spiritually counterproductive. Bruce Charlton. It was in 2007 that I began to take an academic interest in the gross and worsening subfertility of native people in the entire developed world, and I did some research into what seemed like a possible exception, Mormons, from 2009. I have also written about the genetically catastrophic problem of human reproduction over the past several generations. So it would be fair to say I am aware of the problem. But being aware of this biological problem, and doing something significant to reverse it, are very different things. I used to believe that certain kinds of religion pointed the way forward, but this hope has been dashed by the events of the past 15 years. For instance, my positive example of US Mormons have now slid into substantial subfertility, and the events of 2020 demonstrate, as a strong generalization, that all religions across the world are now subordinate to the destruction-motivated global totalitarian strategy. My conclusion is that this matter of biological degradation and extinction, with the inevitability of civilizational collapse, while real, is insoluble, mainly because nobody at all is serious about even trying to solve it at the requisite large scale, plus that there are no known effective answers. Any plan to save our civilization is therefore futile, either ignorant, deluded or deceptive. This has the effect of dissociating spiritual and Christian concerns. When the large-scale future is not going to be saved by our spiritual imperatives, this means that we are free to focus upon our personal situation, which is probably something that we ought to be doing anyway. Something that we should not, continually be trying to extrapolate from what we ought spiritually to be doing in the here and now, according to our deepest analysis and convictions. We should not, be trying to link our personal spiritual quest into some practical/material/real world supposedly groupish benefit. As when people talk about some kind of imagined Christianity as the basis for some kind of future and viable Western civilization. That's all nonsense, because it is way too late for such palliations. Because things are much worse than such people believe. Indeed, the problem is that a few people are very belatedly waking up to a situation that has been a solidly established and relentless trend since the 1990s, and roots that go back considerably before that. These people have only recently noticed the top-down and multi-pronged and purposive quality of globalist strategies against Western nations. Consequently, they grossly underestimate 1. The profound and extensive damage already done, and 2. The extent to which the whole process has been driven by cowardice, self-loathing, and suicidal motivations among the hedonistic, godless, nihilistic Western masses. Such a situation does not respond to common sense suggestions, angry exhortations or desperate pep talks. One kind of deception comes from people whose real and mastering concern is to have a safe, comfortable, convenient, pleasurable, prosperous, or high-status life for themselves, but who want to dress up such understandable, but blatantly self-centered, motivations in some pseudo-tribal concern of a civilizational kind.